June 10, 1944, just outside Saint-Lô, France. The morning fog hangs low over the hedgerows, carrying the heavy scent of damp earth and cordite. A German infantry platoon of the 352nd Infantry Division crouches inside a shallow trench, their boots sunk in mud, helmets streaked with grime. Private Ernst Müller, 22, grips his Mauser rifle so tightly that his knuckles whiten beneath the dirt. For hours, the sky has been unnervingly quiet. Then, without warning, the air splits open. The first shells arrive not with a single whistling approach, but with dozens. The horizon flashes white, followed by a wall of sound so violent it feels like the air itself has been ripped apart. The ground convulses, throwing clods of mud and shattered branches into the air. Müller's ears ring. He can't tee. The attack at Saint-Lô was not a coincidence. It was the product of a machine that the Germans, for all their engineering prowess, had underestimated. Miles behind the front, far from the chaos and screams, the U.S. Army's artillery batteries were already resetting their sights. Gun crews moved with the precision of clockwork. Sweat glistened on their faces as they loaded the massive 155 Long Tom guns, their barrels glinting in the pale light. These men were not frontline soldiers, they were engineers of destruction. Each Long Tom shell weighed nearly 100 pounds and could hit a target over 14 miles away. Nearby, smaller but equally deadly 105 howitzers joined in, their shorter barrels booming in rhythmic unison. Every gun, every angle, every range had already been pre-calculated by.
It was July 26, 1944, near Coutances, Normandy. The air hung thick with smoke and the stench of burning fields. German Panzer Grenadiers of the 2nd SS Division, Das Reich, had dug into defensive positions along a hedgerow line waiting for the American push. They had faced Sherman tanks, Thunderbolt fighters, and endless waves of infantry before, but nothing unnerved them more than the sound of silence before American artillery struck. At 600 hours, the silence broke. A U.S. forward observer, First Lieutenant Charles Donovan, watched from his spotter plane high above the Bocage country. Through his binoculars, he spotted movement, a convoy of German half-tracks repositioning behind the farmhouse. Calmly, he spoke into his radio. Fire mission, target grid C417-229. Enemy vehicles in the open. Time on target. All batteries, stand by. 20 miles away, the orders rippled through U.S. Artillery Command. Operators scribbled coordinates. Gun captains adjusted elevation wheels by fractions of degrees. Each crew fired at precisely calculated intervals, some early, some delayed, so that every round traveling at different speeds and distances would arrive at the same moment. The German soldiers never heard the incoming shells. There was no warning whine, no buildup of thunder, just impact. In a single, unified heartbeat, the world exploded around them. Dirt, steel, and body parts filled the air as the ground heaved. The farmhouse evaporated in a storm of dust and flame. The half-tracks, shredded like paper, were hurled onto their sides. Men screamed into nothingness. Most never saw what hit them. When the dust settled, the hedgerow line had December 20th, 1944, near Saint-Vith, Belgium. The snow was falling thick, muffling the sounds of engines and distant gunfire. American gunners from the 244th Field Artillery Battalion crouched over their weapons, the M1 155mm Long Tom. Each gun, 30 feet long and weighing over 30,000 pounds, was a masterpiece of destructive precision. Its barrel gleamed faintly in the gray dawn as Sergeant Robert Red Haskins barked orders. Elevation 750, fuse set, delay 2 seconds, fire when ready. The command echoed through the frozen air. A moment later, the thunder rolled, a deep, concussive boom that seemed to split the mountains. The Long Tom recoiled violently, spitting flame and smoke, sending its shell screaming across miles of snow-covered forest. Minutes later, that shell, one among hundreds, smashed into an armored German column attempting to push toward Bastogne. The first round struck the lead tank, flipping it onto its side. The next detonated among the infantry, tearing men apart in bursts of snow and fire. Within moments, the road was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered trees. Up above, American spotter aircraft circled like hawks, calling in fresh coordinates as retreating German units tried to regroup. They never got the chance. March 15, 1945, near Remagen, Germany. The Rhine River shimmered like a blade beneath the morning haze. On the western bank, hundreds of American guns, 105mm howitzers, 155mm long toms, and 8-inch heavy artillery were locked in place, barrels angled eastward. The bridgehead at Remagen was critical. German forces were massing on the far side, desperate to destroy the newly captured Ludendorff Bridge and cut off the advancing U.S. 9th Armored Division. But the Americans were ready. What came next would become one of the most devastating demonstrations of coordinated artillery fire in the war, a time-on-target strike. Captain Leonard H. Bishop, commanding Battery B of the 174th Field Artillery, crouched over a radio map table. Every gun, every battery, every shell, timed to the second, he said, calmly, almost reverently. His radio operator adjusted his watch. Then, across dozens of miles, the orders came down the line. Fire mission, time on target, grid 729. One by one, the guns thundered, but not all at once. Each battery fired at precisely calculated moment so that every shell, regardless of distance, would arrive on the enemy position simultaneously. 3 minutes later, hell opened. Hundreds of shells landed in the same breath, a single apocalyptic instant. The sky flashed white, the ground convulsed. German engineers working to set demolition charges on the bridge were that could have been disaster. April 1945, the final month of the European War. Germany was collapsing. Cities smoldering, roads clogged with refugees and shattered convoys. Yet one sound still dominated the front lines: the unending thunder of American artillery. On the outskirts of Kassel, Sergeant James Red Miller's 105mm howitzer crew of the 12th Field Artillery Battalion had barely slept in 2 days. The gun's barrel was streaked with carbon, its breech hot to the touch. They had fired over 1,000 rounds in 36 hours. Counter battery, suppression, smoke, and high explosive. Each fire mission came down the line with cold precision, and each one was executed without hesitation. Nearby, the forward observers, the eyes of the artillery, crouched in church steeples and bombed-out buildings, their field glasses sweeping the horizon. Some rode in light Piper Cub aircraft, darting between clouds, calling out enemy positions by radio. They could spot a German gun flash, call coordinates, and have counterfire raining down within 90 seconds. For the Wehrmacht, that efficiency was soul-crushing. Major Hans Mayer, a German artillery officer captured in April, told his interrogators that his batteries could never keep pace. We would fire 3 shells, and before the third had landed, the Americans had found us. Their shells fell with mechanical precision. We felt hunted. American artillery wasn't just faster, it was omnipresent. It was the background noise of the war. The front lines trembled under the steady heartbeat of the guns, their rhythm almost comforting to Allied troops. Infantrymen joked that the 105s were our angels, always there, always ready. Even when American troops advanced through shattered towns like Aachen, Bastogne, or the Hürtgen Forest, artillery followed them step by step, leapfrogging batteries forward, maintaining constant cover.
May 1945, the guns finally fell silent. The fields of Europe, from the hedgerows of Normandy to the forests of the Ardennes, lay scarred and blackened, pitted with the circular craters of artillery impacts. The smell of cordite and damp soil lingered long after the last shell had been fired. And in that silence, both victors and vanquished began to grasp the scale of what American artillery had achieved. To the U.S. Army, the artillery branch was no longer just a support arm, it was the backbone of victory. To the Germans, it was the one force they could neither outthink nor outrun. Captured Wehrmacht reports tell the story plainly. One officer from the 352nd Infantry Division wrote, "We feared no weapon more than their artillery. It was not possible to fight it. It destroyed our morale before it destroyed our bodies." Another from the elite Panzer-Lehr Division noted, "Even our Tigers could not endure prolonged fire. When the shelling began, there was nowhere safe. No trench, no tank, no bunker. American artillery had evolved into a symphony of precision and coordination. By the end of the war, fire missions could be planned, executed, and adjusted in under 5 minutes. Dozens of guns across miles of terrain could synchronize perfectly, their shells timed to detonate within a single second of one another. The time-on-target technique was so effective that German defenders often had no warning, no chance to run, and no idea how many guns were firing at them. It wasn't just firepower, it was control. The Americans could sculpt the battlefield, isolate enemy positions, and even fake attacks with coordinated barrages. In many cases, German defenders surrendered simply because they couldn't endure another bombardment. For the soldiers who survived, the psychological toll was immense. In post-war interviews, German veterans often spoke of the sound, the deep rising thunder that rolled across the hills,